Wasai'ati. Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Johnson-Peta. I'm the Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, and I'd like to welcome you here to our State of Indian Nations event. NCAI is the largest, the oldest, and organization in Washington, D.C. representing the tribal governments across the country. I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests to Washington, D.C. We have many folks listening to us across the country to watch the State of 2012 State of Indian Nations Address. And across the country, we have students, tribal citizens and leaders, and have gathered in the schools and centers to watch the event together. Among many of the events across the country, we're pleased that Mr. Starr's history class in Santa Fe, New Mexico is joining us. We have the University of Oklahoma College of Law and the Center for Native American Youth in Washington, D.C., the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Office and the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, leaders of tomorrow and today's event that are watching, and there are many other more watching events across the country. And we're glad and happy that they're all joining us. We have an incredible turnout here today, and we'd like to acknowledge some of the guests that are in the audience. And among those guests, special guests we have today, we have our board members of NCAI. We have President Fawn Sharp, Chairman Ron Allen, Chairman Matthew Weesaw, President Ed Thomas, Chairman Ned Norris, President Don Arnold, President Cynthia Awanoa, and David Gibb. We're also joined by tribal leaders across the country, and some of those are our Chairman Gary Hayes and Councilman Eddie Tallis. Among our federal partners, of course, we have the esteemed and honorable Daniel Akaka and Representative Tom Cole, the Assistant Secretary Larry Echohawk, Kimberly Teehee and Charlie Galbraith from the White House, Loretta Toole and David Mullen from the Senate Committee, Yvette Rubidoux from IHS, and Aaron Klein from Treasury. We also have our Native organization partners, Ernie Stevens, Chairman of NIGA, Rick West and Mellor Willie from the Housing Council. And finally, I want to thank Native Voice One and many of our tribal and public radio stations across the country for airing today's address and bringing the State of Indian Nations to hundreds of thousands of people in Indian country and beyond. This year, we've asked an American Indian active duty military service member to begin our event and to introduce President Keel. It is my distinct honor to be able to introduce and to welcome Lieutenant Colonel T.J. Huntinghorse of the U.S. Marine Corps, who is Kiowa and Choctaw, and a U.S. Navy judge advocate at the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Huntinghorse has participated in deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Please join me in thanking him for his continued service and welcoming him here today. Lieutenant Colonel Huntinghorse.
Thank you. Good morning, and it is my pleasure to introduce the President of the National Congress of American Indians, President Jefferson Keel. President Keel is currently the Lieutenant Governor of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma and was recently unanimously reelected to his second term as the President of NCAI. I'm here today to represent the American and Alaska Native service members and veterans, and it is an honor to serve and protect all citizens of the United States, including members of America's First Nations. Today, there are tens of thousands of active duty service members and over 300,000 Native veterans who know the great sacrifice to protect our freedom and our sovereignty. One of these great veterans is Jefferson Keel. President Keel is himself a retired U.S. Army officer with over 20 years of active duty service. He has translated that sense of duty into serving the Indian country and building a stronger America. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the National Congress of American Indians, Jefferson Keel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that warm introduction. I want to thank the Native service members and veterans who have joined us today. Many know the story of Indian country, the challenges we have faced, and the ones we face today. But very few Americans know the story of hundreds of thousands of tribal members who have served in the United States military as far back as the Revolutionary War. As a veteran myself, I want to thank Colonel Hunting Horse and the 24,000 active duty American Indian and Alaska Native service members serving today to protect the sovereignty of the United States and the tribal nations of North America. Thank you. My fellow tribal leaders, tribal citizens and American citizens, members of the National Congress of American Indians, members of the administration, members of the 112th Congress, and those listening or watching today, I'm honored to speak to you all, but especially to address representatives of the more than 5 million Native people and the 566 tribal nations of Indian country. The state of Indian nations is strong. Our nations are strong. Our people are strong. Like our sovereignty, the strength of our nations is our inheritance. The state of Indian nations, as I outline it today, should be defined by what we commit to right now to make the state of Indian nations even stronger in the years to come. We all know tribes have faced a difficult history. We're rising from harsh economic conditions to contribute to a more prosperous tomorrow. Tribes have been doing more with less for generations. And I'm here today to outline a path to overcome our shared challenges, to lay out specific economic changes and improvements for our tribal nations. Some of these changes require legislative action, but many others can come from direct action by the administration. Ultimately, though, it will be the actions of Native people that can change their nations and our communities. Native people are the first Americans. Tribal nations are the first governments of this country, one of the 3 sovereigns recognized in the United States Constitution. And our America is a place where each member of the American family of governments contributes to a prosperous future. To achieve that vision, we need leaders who understand that Indian country matters, especially in a presidential election year. We're all aware of the impact an election can have on Indian country. And in recent years, many have come to learn that the door swings both ways. Indian country can have a significant impact on elections, and it can be game-changing. As the grandmas on the Navajo reservation and the young people in Alaska Native villages go to the ballot box this November, they're standing on the shoulders of those who fought hard for that right. As students at Arizona State University and veterans in foreign lands cast their vote, they're reminding America that we matter. In the 1940s, thousands of Native veterans returned home to a shocking reality. America had accepted them on the battlefield, but had no place for them at the ballot box. Ira Hayes, a member of the Gila River Indian community, who raised a flag at Iwo Jima, returned home to the homeland that he had defended and was denied the right to vote. Miguel Trujillo from Isleta Pueblo, who enlisted as a Marine in the days following Pearl Harbor, returned home to New Mexico and was denied the right to vote. These American heroes inspired the fight all the way to the federal courts for the right to participate in the 1948 elections. They expressed the power of the Native vote for the first time they cast their ballots, and it's been at work ever since. Stories like these have shown Native people that when it comes to Native vote, we can and we must think big. Simply put, we will work tirelessly in 2012 to see the highest Native vote turnout ever. We know that it can be done. For instance, on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana, turnout rates are regularly over 80%. A survey of seniors at UCLA showed that Native young people participate at rates higher than any other group of students. This is especially important because almost 500,000 Native youth will be eligible to vote for the first time in the next 4 years. Native people didn't see the world and don't see the world in 4-year election cycles. We're focused on building stronger communities for generations to come. When we step in the ballot box, we want to vote for candidates who stand with tribal nations to create strong, prosperous futures. We're not mobilizing for one party or for one candidate. Indians don't just vote D for Democrat or R for Republican. For us, it's I for Indian. We're independent voters, and we'll continue to vote for the candidate who is strong on our issues and cares about our priorities. That's why today I'm calling on all presidential candidates to make sure Indian country is at the table during the campaign and throughout your administration. These specific actions should form the foundation of your Native policy platform. First, we call on the President to send a special message to Congress on the importance of the nation-to-nation relationship. In 1970, President Nixon sent a historic message to Congress on tribal self-determination. That message launched the self-determination era, the very framework that allowed tribes to prove our capacity as governments. All presidents should do the same. Second, we call on the President to fully implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We specifically call for a review of all existing federal law to ensure they're in alignment with the Declaration. Third, we call for an annual nation-to-nation summit and ongoing high-level meetings. This would institutionalize the current Nation Summit, Tribal Nation Summit, a meaningful commitment to our nation-to-nation relationship that must be upheld by all future presidents. We also call on the President to convene regular meetings on specific issues between tribal leaders and cabinet secretaries. Fourth, elevate Native people in the federal government. It's past time for qualified Native people to be seated on the federal bench. The appointment of a senior advisor on Native American affairs has advanced policymaking at the White House, and we applaud President Obama for his leadership. With the importance of the Indian budget in the coming decade, we urge the creation of an Office for Native American Programs at the Office of Management and Budget. And finally, we call upon all candidates to actively engage Indian country in your campaign. We invite each candidate to visit Indian country to outline your policy positions. We also urge the campaigns to make sure tribal nations are part of the discussion at the presidential debates. Between now and the election, we have a lot of work to do. For all of the partisan challenges of the past year, the Congress has found common ground on Indian policy. Under the bipartisan leadership of Senators Akaka and Barrasso, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs has reached across party lines to develop legislation that promises to transform Indian country. And in the House, Republicans like Chairman Don Young, and Democrats like Dale Kildee have worked hard to educate their constituents and colleagues about the benefits tribal governments offer our nation. There are some important things the Congress can do right now that can grow Indian economies and create jobs. Without spending a dime, the Congress can fix the problems created by the Carcieri Supreme Court decision and offer certainty for land and trust transactions that are critical to Indian country's economic future. The Department of the Interior is already acting to streamline lease approvals for renewable energy development, and we urge Congress to pass the Hearth Act to expand leasing reform and pass an Indian energy self-determination law. Congress can also act on public safety legislation that will attract businesses to our communities. We urge the passage of amendments to the Stafford Act that are supported by FEMA and would remove burdens from states and tribes in times of critical emergencies when lives are on the line. Native women are the protectors of our culture, our families, and our future. We call on the Senate to pass the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization and the Save Native Women Act, both of which would take critical steps to address the horrific rates of violence being perpetrated against our women. The Native Class Act offers a chance to provide the kind of education our young people need to succeed today and build economies Indian country needs for tomorrow. Our young people must not be left behind anymore. Congress must stand with us now to get these bills passed. But long-term success depends on America keeping her promises. That's why NCAI, along with our partners in Indian country, are making available to you today our plan for the Indian budget. This document outlines our vision for investing in the future of our America and stabilizing the Indian budget. It will create reliable, safe, domestic energy. It will build a 21st education system in America. It will modernize our infrastructure, and it will fund implementation of critical legislation like the Tribal Law and Order Act and the Indian Health Care Improvement Act. Just as our plan holds hope for the future, the Budget Control Act poses great risks. The act requires Congress to cap discretionary spending for the next 10 years. Much of the funding that fulfills the federal trust responsibility is categorized wrongly, in our view, as domestic discretionary spending. The trust responsibility is not a discretionary choice. It is not a line item. It is a solemn agreement that has been sustained over hundreds of years. Unless Congress acts to hold tribal programs harmless, then starting in 2013, we're facing 10 to 15% cuts across the board for the next decade. Cuts that will threaten essential governmental services and affect millions of Native citizens throughout vast regions of rural America. We're well aware of the budget challenges our nation faces. We live in Indian country. We know all about doing more with less. We urge Congress to stand up for the relatively small piece of the federal budget that belongs to tribal nations and our citizens. Protecting the Indian budget is the first step, but long-term success depends on tribal nations having the same opportunities to protect and preserve our communities that are available to state and local governments. We exercise jurisdiction over lands that would make us the fourth largest state in this country. We run dozens of programs previously administered by the federal agencies or states. And we protect reservation environments in the manner that states regulate off-reservation lands. Tribal governments have proven their capacity to grow our economies, educate our people, and manage our resources. We need the federal government to put decision-making power back in the hands of the people who live in Indian country, the people who know best. The people who know best, because these are our homelands. These are our people. The old way of doing business causes missed opportunities every day. The Swinomish Nation in Washington State saw this firsthand. The tribe had worked out a deal with Walmart for a big new store on the reservation. It was a great opportunity, a great deal. $1 million a year in lease revenue for the tribe, and new jobs for tribal members and people throughout the community. As with every lease on Indian lands, the federal government needed to approve it. The process took more than a year, and by the time it was approved, economic conditions had changed. Walmart had made other plans. $1 million for Swinomish people, gone. All those jobs, gone. And this is not an isolated story. Many tribal leaders can tell you stories today about business opportunities lost because of red tape. This is why our federal partners have already proposed crucial lease reforms to free our economies. Tribal nations, again, have proven our capacity. We don't need government involved in all our business decisions. We need flexibility. And by creating it, we will remove barriers that cost us jobs and opportunities. This is a goal I think we can all agree on across the political spectrum. And it's something we can achieve with a change in policy, not an increase in spending. This is the kind of solution that Washington is crying out for, and we in Indian country are eager to answer the call. Ensuring government flexibility will yield more efficient programs and spending because decisions will be made by those best in position to respond to the community needs. It will also relieve administrative burdens at the federal level. This message comes directly from tribal leaders. We went to them with one simple question: what can we do with what we have already without asking for more resources that will provide greater opportunity for Indians, create more impact for federal programs? And over the answer came back: we need freedom at the local level to best use our limited resources. We know what's best because we live in Indian country. We know where the needs are, when we know what works for our people. No one understands Indian life better than the Indian nations themselves, those people who live there daily. Give us the flexibility. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, North Dakota, delivering broadband services across their reservation because of governmental flexibility. The FCC's decision to designate Standing Rock Telecom as an eligible telecommunications carrier means they are the first fully tribally owned and operated broadband company that can receive universal service funds. This designation has empowered Standing Rock to own and operate essential telecommunications infrastructure. This offers avenues for economic development, opportunities to preserve tribal languages and culture, and infrastructure for distance learning programs. That's the kind of flexibility we need in Indian country when only 1 in 10 Native people have access to broadband today. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony in Nevada opened a 65,000 square foot health facility in 2007 that showed the promise of tax-exempt bond financing. Almost $16 million in bonds funded a full-service clinic that serves 100,000 people each year. This project created permanent jobs and built the infrastructure for quality health services. Tribes were denied full access to this source of financing until the Recovery Act created a limited bond offering. Based on that experience, the Treasury released a report in December recommending the governmental parity for tribal nations because it works. This will bring huge economic benefits to tribes and surrounding regional economies. Education is another example where flexibility can prepare our children for the global marketplace. The Cherokee Nation's Language Immersion School formed an innovative partnership with Apple Computers to integrate technology and the Cherokee language. They developed Cherokee language software for use on Macintosh computers, on iPhones, iPods, and iPads. Students even chat online in Cherokee with students from Eastern Band of Cherokees in North Carolina. This is a powerful example of tribal innovation and initiative, the type of innovation that vesting tribes with greater authority over our own programs unleashes. Whether in economic development or education, healthcare, or energy, the key to getting it right is the freedom to identify and tear down barriers to our success. Tribal leaders carry with us a dream. It's a dream passed down from our parents and our grandparents. It doesn't look forward to 2012 or 2016. It looks to the 7th generation. We see a future where the trust relationship actually works. It works for tribal nations, and it works for our federal partners. Our ancestors knew that tribes could govern our nations and govern ourselves like no one else. Today, we've proven it. Residents of rural Oklahoma are driving to our health facilities because they offer the best services around. States and counties are turning to our traditional knowledge to best manage natural resources. Citizens of these rural states are coming to tribes for job opportunities and good education at tribal colleges. And companies are coming to us to set up businesses on the reservations and bring American jobs home. When we have the tools and freedom that we need, we're creating businesses, delivering services, and leading the way. It's time to build our trust on that reality. That trust also requires consultation, legally enforceable consultation. Without the power of legislation and accountability, free, prior, and informed consent are just some nice words on paper. As President Obama himself said when he announced his support for the UN Declaration, what matters far more than words are actions to match those words. We call for action to make consultation count. Enforceable consultation means we must talk about another idea, tribal consent. There would be a public outcry if the federal government tried to impose policy on a state without its consent. But the concerns of tribal nations are routinely overlooked, even when more than a dozen tribes are larger than some northeastern states. This must not stand. Our America is a place where all candidates know that we matter, and America sees it at the ballot box. It's a place where each and every president honors our unique nation-to-nation relationship, where Indian country is always at the table, not just because it's a good idea, it's the right thing to do, but it's because it's a smart thing to do. Our America is a home to a Congress that works across party lines to free our economies. Our America is a place where governments keep their promises. Our America is where tribal nations create economic opportunities, where people come to us for the best jobs. It's a place where tribes are on the forefront of new technology, high-tech manufacturing, telemedicine, and clean energy. Our America is where indigenous people reach across borders and bring home economic opportunity for all Americans. As the oldest governments in this country, tribal nations understand what's required to overcome stark economic conditions. Perhaps more than any other time in history, our nations must stand together, empowered to make profound and permanent improvements in the lives of our people. Our nations are committed to the success of the United States of America. Let us realize that future together so that our nations thrive today and forever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, President Keel. And now I have the privilege of introducing the champion, one of our champions from Congress, and one of our dear friends. Congressman Tom Cole has agreed to give us the congressional response. He is a fifth-generation Oklahoman, an enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation. He's been serving Indian issues in Congress since 2002, and we hope that he continues in that position for a long time to come. Please help me welcome Congressman Tom Cole.
It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to follow my good friend, my fellow Chickasaw, Governor Jefferson Keel, Lieutenant Governor Jefferson Keel. Governor Keel was here to give you and did give you a thoughtful and an eloquent address. I'm here to prove to you that not all Chickasaws are thoughtful and eloquent. But it is my privilege to look across Indian country, and I do so like everybody in this room, or probably everybody in this room, as an American, and a very proud American. And I do so as someone who is very proud of my state. I know most of you are proud of the states in which you reside, assuming you're American citizens. But I also do that as a fellow Native American and as somebody who's proud of my tribal traditions and my tribe. My forebears and my family were members of the Chickasaw Nation and leaders in the Chickasaw Nation before there was a United States of America. My great-great-grandfather was clerk of the Chickasaw Supreme Court before there was a territory of Oklahoma. And my great-grandfather was treasurer of the Chickasaw Nation before Oklahoma was a state. And so we approach this, as most people in this room approach this, with a very long and different and nuanced view of American history. That's not true for most Americans. They don't have the ability to draw from that tradition. And most of the problems we face when we deal with other Americans is largely because they're ignorant of those traditions and have not had the opportunity, quite frankly, to be educated about them. And they labor under many, many misconceptions of who we are and what our status is in the larger political system. In Washington today, I would say from a Native American perspective and from an American and an Oklahoma perspective, it's the best of times and the worst of times, to borrow a phrase from Charles Dickens. It's the best of times in many areas. We have, certainly in the House and I think in the Senate, bipartisan cooperation on Native American issues to an unprecedented degree. That's unusual. And frankly, Native American issues aren't partisan issues. I don't think should ever be approached in a partisan fashion. The reality is most of our interests span political parties, and some of them are absolutely irrelevant to the political dialogue and debate between Republicans and Democrats that goes on in this country. But what is enduring is our federal trust relationship as individual Indian nations with the federal government, and whether or not the federal government carries out its responsibilities in that particular area. In the appropriations area, where, as Jackie said, I specialize and spend a great deal of time, this has been a pretty good year for us. I want to commend the administration. I'm a very conservative Republican. Obviously, I have some differences with the administration, but each year that the president has been in office, he's put forward a real budget and a good budget and a serious budget for us to consider in the legislative process. And certainly on the House side, I can tell you we have a real bipartisan alliance on interior appropriations, where most Indian funding takes place. Our subcommittee chairman, Mike Simpson from Idaho, our ranking member, Jim Moran from Virginia, have a wonderful partnership and working relationship. And because of that, and working honestly with the administration, we've made substantial progress. We increased substantially, 10% in the House, appropriations for the Indian Health Service. The president is facing a difficult budget. He reduced the BIA budget very slightly. We thought actually it was too much, and so we restored some of that funding. And if you look at Indian funding on things like impact aid, on things like housing, across the board, while it didn't see the same increases that we saw in other areas, it was actually essentially held harmless in the House. And that's a good thing when we're experiencing difficulties in other areas. So that bipartisan relationship has been very powerful and very good. I think you've also seen it expressed in the establishment in the Natural Resources Committee, for the first time in many, many years in the House, a subcommittee on Indian and Native Alaskan affairs. That's something that my good friend Dale Kildee and I have worked on for many, many years and finally came to fruition. That would not have happened if Doc Hastings, the Republican chairman of that committee, had not been supportive of that. And he put in as the chairman Don Young from Alaska, and we have no better ally on Native American issues than Don Young. And his partner in that, my friend Dan Boren from Oklahoma, is equally committed and equally knowledgeable. So that's been a really good thing, and it's provided a vehicle where we've begun to get much more in the way of attention, focus, and momentum for issues that are important in Indian country. Let me mention just a few of those. H.R. 2362, I'm a Chickasaw, so of course I'll always start out with my own legislation. which is a trade bill. A trade bill because we have a unique opportunity with the country of Turkey, which has a long-standing interest in Native American affairs and a profound belief that the Turkish people are related to Native Americans, and wants to move ahead and wants to partner with individual tribal nations for economic development. That bill has been heard in the subcommittee and is now awaiting floor action. Or we have H.R. 205, the Hearth Act by my good friend Representative Heinrich from New Mexico, Democratic bill. Very, very important in extending tribal authority in surface leasing areas, things that would give individual tribal governments precisely the kinds of flexibility and authority that Lieutenant Governor Keel was talking about in his address. And that's a bipartisan bill, a good bill. It, too, awaits floor action. We also have H.R. 1599, which is an economic development bill, which I've got forward. More importantly, because he's the chairman, Don Young is working on a major economic development initiative. Again, things that would give tribal governments the tools they need to control their own affairs and their own destiny. We've had hearings on the Carcieri fix, both on the bills that Representative Kildee has offered and I've offered, and I always like to say I'll take either one of those bills. I would be delighted if Representative Kildee's bill passed or mine. He's a wonderful partner, great friend. We're going to miss him when he leaves Congress. So we have a lot of things happening in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, and I don't pretend to speak authoritatively to that, we have my good friends, Chairman Akaka here and Senator Barrasso, his ranking member, but we don't have two better advocates. And they've worked hard to focus attention on Carcieri in the Senate. They've worked hard on economic development issues and to begin to educate their colleagues on a bipartisan basis and the areas in which we can move together. So we have a strong bicameral as well as bipartisan partnership in Native American affairs. I would be remiss not to mention the administration as well. First, the personnel, many of whom are here. I see Secretary Echohawk and obviously Director Rubidoux here, but also Secretary Salazar. They have shown continuous, sustained interest and commitment to the movement of important legislation and important administrative decisions in Indian country. I said Kim Keegi, and we were actually talking about this. The administration has put in place advisors at senior levels at cabinet positions so that members that are coming into those, or individuals that are coming into those important positions have immediately available to them advice and counsel from people that understand Indian country and all its nuances. And of course, obviously, the presidential initiative on the Native American Nation Summit, I think, is really one of the hallmark contributions to institutionalizing and strengthening the relationship between tribal governments. I could go on, individual initiatives that the administration has taken on surface leasing and on renewable energy. I'd like to, as an oil and gas guy and a coal guy, to get some subsurface flexibility there, but we're going to work on that. And this was a very important step in the right direction on the part of the administration. So there's lots of good things happening there. And again, the good things that happen are almost invariably bipartisan things where we found common ground, can work together for the good of Indian country. On the other hand, when I say it's the worst of times, there are some challenges. I think particularly we need to have more bipartisanship in the appropriations process between the two bodies. The reality is the House this time outdid the Senate in terms of its commitment to funding of Indian programs. And when we got into the process of negotiation, we basically were fighting a bipartisan alliance on the House that wanted to keep money in Native American concerns, particularly in the health area. And on the Senate side, it wasn't so much opposition, it was just simply other priorities. They're not against what we're trying to do, but they have additional priorities. I would argue there actually should be few, if any, priorities higher than the trust relationship that the United States has with individual Indian nations. So we need to expand that bipartisan and bicameral cooperation. We need to build on the good works of Senator Akaka and Senator Barrasso and have a partnership where we move together, where frankly, Democrats and Republicans can go into Indian country with a great deal to be proud of instead of a great deal to apologize for. But let's be real. If we wait simply on the federal government to take care of our problems, we'll be waiting for a very long time. Indians of all people ought to know self-reliance, self-progress, self-determination, as Lieutenant Governor Keel said, are the real routes to moving forward. The government's job is to keep its commitments, honor its trust responsibilities, and work with us to remove the obstacles that have been placed in front of tribal development and the development of individual Indian people. That's something where we have a long way to go. The scope of our challenge is historic and monumental, and most Americans don't realize it. I could sit here and quote ad nauseum statistics we all know and make the point in whether it's in terms of their education, their lifespan, their health, their opportunities to move forward. The first Americans are still, after over 230 years of this country's existence, the last Americans. That needs to change. It's a national disgrace. It's a national challenge. It'll take a national effort to move us in the right direction. I think the challenge for this particular organization is to educate the rest of America about the challenges that we face in Indian country. And I'm proud of what this organization has done, frankly, throughout its existence. It has a long and an honorable history of doing just that. But the scope of the challenge is just amazing. This summer, I had the honor of traveling with my good friend, Secretary Echohawk and Director Rubidoux, and Jody Gillette was with us from now the Interior, formerly with the White House, Congressman Simpson, Congressman McCullum from Minnesota, and we all went first to Chickasaw and Choctaw country in Oklahoma, where we have been fortunate. We've had challenges like other people have had challenges. This is not our historic homeland. My forebears didn't come there by choice, but they've used the tools and the opportunities they've had, and they've had their set of hardships, but they've overcome them in many ways. And we have thriving tribal economies, dynamic tribal governments that are doing well. Then we went to see some of our friends on the great reservations in North and South Dakota, who are also resilient, innovative, able, but their challenges are greater. And the challenges they face, Americans should see. They should go to Pine Ridge. They should go to Cheyenne River. They should go to Standing Rock. They should see some of the challenges that their fellow Americans are facing. And I'm sure if they saw them, they understood them, they would work with us to overcome them. So that's going to be our great challenge going forward. We have a very, very different perspective on American history. And I want to end with a couple of stories to drive that home. My great-aunt, Teato, was a very famous Indian folklore artist and storyteller, really of international renown. And she not only told stories of our people, Chickasaws, but a lot of tribes, and she used to pick up historical anecdotes and incidents and try to draw a moral out of them that an Indian would draw out of them. And I remember one, and I won't be able to quote it verbatim, but it's one of my favorites, and it's based on a real incident. It's an incident of a Southern Cheyenne war chief in treaty negotiations in the 1860s dealing with the American government and trying to comprehend and encapsulate in words the enormity of the challenge and the change that he was seeing in the course of his lifetime. And in the course of those treaties negotiations, he addressed the representatives of the United States government, and he was an American, but not an American citizen, obviously. And he said, once this was all the land of the red man, but then came the white man and the black man and the yellow man. And I've thought about this, and I've thought about nature. And in nature, aren't there white horses and black horses and red horses and horses of many colors? And I've thought about birds, and there are white birds and black birds and brown birds and red birds, but all one bird, all one horse, all one man. The Great Spirit must have wanted this to become the land of all the peoples, and so it shall be forevermore. Now, if you think about American history, that is a pretty profound way to encapsulate really who we are as a people, as an American nation. And that's where he concluded his story. But my great-aunt added, if you really know Indians, you really know what they don't say is sometimes more important than what they do say. And when he gave that eloquent speech and he recognized the changing reality of the world in which he lived, he did not say he would give up who he was or who his tribe was or his languages or his traditions. He intended to keep those within the greater whole that he was now becoming part of. That's who we are. We're the oldest part of America, the most remarkable part of America, actually the most diverse part of America, but each and every person in here who's a member of a tribe intends to remain who you are and to retain and pass on that identity, your culture, your traditions, but yes, your unique political status within the Constitution of the United States. Each generation of American Indians usually has to educate the rest of the country about what that status is, who we are, and who we intend to be. Our Navajo brethren have a real story and a phrase they use, and I'm going to take a little liberty with it, the long walk, one of the great tragedies that they went through as a people. But we ought to remember, when we think about the long walk, it's a little bit different than a lot of the traditions in Oklahoma, like Cherokees with the Trail of Tears, or Chickasaws with their forced removal stories, or so many of our tribes. The long walk, if you know the history, as of course most everybody in this room does, is a two-way walk. It was a long walk away, but it was a long walk back home too. And we're engaged as Native Americans in a very long walk, the longest walk in American history. And much of it was a walk away from who we were, and sometimes forced relocation, sometimes forced assimilation, sometimes forced efforts to literally eliminate tribal governments altogether. But we're now, I think, at the turning point, and we're in the long walk back home, the long walk back to retaining our sovereignty, retaining our identity, and retaining and celebrating the unique contribution that each and every Indian nation makes to this wonderful nation that we all call the United States of America. Thank you very much.
And now you all know why we're so proud of our enrolled Chickasaw member of Congress and his profound words that he shared with us today. Today, we also are honored to be able to be joined by two other members of Congress that gives us a good example of this bipartisan effort to really come together. So I want to introduce and to recognize today we have Chairman Akaka, who is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. He's a native Hawaiian. He's brought the spirit of cultural protections, of the importance of some of the values of our language programs, and of course the hope and the opportunities to come forward as part of his championship in the Senate Committee. And he's joined today by Vice Chairman Senator Barrasso from Wyoming, who has, among many things in his support for Indian country, is really championing the energy bill and moving forward the energy bill, which we think is going to be another great economic opportunity for all of Indian country. And if either one of you would like to say a few words, we'd be glad to have you both come up here, standing together like you do in the committee. Thank you.
Aloha. Aloha mai kako. It is a pleasure to be with you today and to hear NCAI President Keel's assessment of the state of the Indian nations and outline tribal priorities for the coming year. It is important for all Native American communities to be they American Indian, Alaska Native, or even Native Hawaiian, to take stock of where they are and set achievable goals for the coming year. In this time when all governments are having to do more with less, we must endeavor to strengthen the ability of tribal governments to develop their local economies, spur job creation, and meet the needs of their people. As chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, I am committed to reminding my colleagues about our trust responsibility and the promises made to tribal nations, and working to protect the federal programs and services that are mandatory to meeting that responsibility. Vice Chairman Barrasso and I continue to lead the committee in a bipartisan manner to resolve ambiguity in federal law regarding the rights of Native communities and the jurisdiction of their governments. We look to advance Native solutions to Native concerns. In this Congress, the committee has held numerous hearings, roundtables, and listening sessions because I believe in hearing from the stakeholders as we do important work impacting Indian country. Native communities are innovative in their approaches to self-sufficiency, particularly in energy, economic development, and education. They are demonstrating the capacity to meet the needs of the communities, and we must remove barriers to their work. In keeping with the federal policy of self-determination and self-governance, the committee will continue to build the record on issues vital to Native peoples, their unique identities, and the importance of their homelands. We will work with you to build the foundation for a new era in the government-to-government relationship. You also have a strong partner in the Obama administration in Assistant Secretary Larry Echohawk. And we've had good cooperation with them and relationships, and also with the Secretary Salazar as well. As many of you know, my two top priorities are the Carcieri Fix legislation and the Native Hawaiian Government Reorganization Act. Both are vital to ensuring parity in federal law and resolving ambiguities in America's relationship with its First Peoples. The Carcieri Fix bill clarifies the Secretary of the Interior's ability to take lands into trust for all tribes, an authority that the Secretary has exercised for more than 75 years. Carcieri has created instability in Native and rural communities across the country, and in legislative fix creates over 100,000 jobs for American workers and significantly improves law enforcement on and near reservations. We are seeing new legal challenges to the status of Indian lands. These kinds of lawsuits cost money, and that is better spent meeting the needs of Native peoples. This issue has bipartisan and bicameral support, and I extend my aloha to my good friend Tom Cole for his leadership on this issue. almost 120 years ago, the United States aided in the illegal overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii, depriving Native Hawaiians of their traditional government. Shortly thereafter, the Congress began exercising its Indian Affairs powers to address Native Hawaiian conditions and has done so in over 150 laws. 100 years later, an apology to the Native Hawaiian people for the United States' role in the overthrow of the kingdom and the suppression of their right to self-determination was enacted. Native Hawaiians have waited too long for justice. It is time to make things right and pass my bill. Under my direction, the committee will continue to advance several other important bills. The Native Class Act empowers Native communities to implement strategies that produce strong educational outcomes for their children. The Save Native Women Act ensures that tribes have the authority and resources to address issues of violence against women. These bills go to the heart of a community's ability to thrive. As a Native Hawaiian working with others, doing things with aloha and being pono and right and just is a cornerstone of who I am. My career is proof that being who we are as Native peoples is effective in Washington, D.C. I do encourage tribal nations to participate in the process. Meet with my committee staff to share your concerns and solutions, and continue to holomua to move forward together. We are part of a great nation, and we must continue to keep it great. And by coming together and working together, we can bring it about. Mahalo nui loa, and I look forward to working with you all on your priorities. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to make these remarks. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless the Indians and NCAI and the Alaskans, and God bless the United States of America. Aloha.
I wanted to stand here today with our chairman to show how we want to continue to work together in a bipartisan way. And we will continue to do that on behalf of the Indian people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to be here to express to President Keel my appreciation, my admiration, and my respect. I'm so grateful to be here with you, and Representative Cole's statements, absolutely right. Flexibility and authority. And I want to thank you for sharing those wonderful stories of the history of your family as well as your great aunt's story. Those are lessons that we should and can never forget. They are critical to all of us. Listen very closely to the remarks, and to me it all comes down to this. What's the headline of this? It's tear down the barriers to success. And you continue to face those barriers to success. It's remove the obstacles. as you have said, and that's what we are going to continue to do as we work to remove the obstacles that stand in the way of economic success, of jobs, of health care, of education, and a better way of life. So I just wanted to be here to share with my chairman and with Representative Cole all of our concerns as well as our good wishes. So thank you so much for letting me be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you again to our members of Congress for joining us today. We know you have busy schedules, but we are honored by your presence. At this time, we'd like to open up for questions. We'll start by opening up to questions to our press, and then we'll go to open it up to questions of other folks. We do have people online. We have over 500 sites watching live right now, as well as the taping that will happen. C-SPAN's taping and others are taping, as well as the radio stations. So we will be taking questions online via the iPad. So at this point, any questions from press? First, could you please state who you are and who you represent? And we do have microphones. Thank you.
Do you think that allows tribes and especially some of these bills that have lingered in the Senate, do you think that kind of opens the door for some of these bills, because there is such bipartisan agreement on them, to become top priorities for this Congress?
I certainly hope so. I think with as you mentioned, the partisan gridlock, I think that the partisan gridlock is not because of the bills that affect Indian people. As we said earlier, Congress has found common ground on those issues that affect Indian country. On Indian policy, I think that you see across both aisles support for those programs. I don't know what the outcome will be in some of these bills getting them passed, but certainly we are encouraged by the bipartisan support for all of those bills, and we thank you. Thank you for that question.
Good morning. My name is Levi Rickert. I'm with the Native News Network. Yesterday, the U.S. Census Bureau released its figures. 78% of American Indians live off or away from tribal lands. What can be done to make sure our Indians who are living in urban settings and rural settings can get benefit? Because so much of the money goes directly to tribes.
That's an interesting question, and thank you for that. We do realize that the urban Indian populations, the populations of Indian people in the urban areas are growing. It's growing. Many of our people have left and moving to urban areas because of a lack of job opportunities, a lack of programs, and lack of access to those opportunities in and around our local communities. But the tribal governments themselves are looking at opportunities to assist those tribal members. It's very difficult at times, particularly in those areas where the dollars are limited, and because federal dollars are appropriated and are utilized by those that are benefited within that local community. And so I know that NCAI and some of our partner organizations have looked at how we can help those people in those urban areas. And particularly in the healthcare arena, we have some urban healthcare centers that provide health care and access to health care for those who reside in those areas. But those are limited. We don't have those in all of the areas that we need. We simply have a handful of those health care centers. We need more. But it's a very difficult question and one that we continue to work on. Yeah, Jackie, would you want to answer?
I just want to add one thing to that because, first of all, yesterday was a great day when they released that report at the museum, the Native American Museum, and we were pleased to have some of our staff also be part of that. But look at the maps that is in the press release and the report, and if you look at the maps, the concentration of natives is actually really close and adjacent to Native communities. So even though we do have a large spread of what we would call urban Indians, the highest concentrations are really adjacent to the tribal communities. Next question Any other press with questions? Yes.
Alex Reese, Cronkite News Service. I was just wondering how the President's State of the Union was obviously the other day, and he did mention the 24,000 Native Americans that are in the armed forces. However, he failed to mention much more about the Native American communities. What is your response to that, especially because, as you said, you are the first Americans?
Thank you. Obviously, we'd like a lot more exposure. We'd like a lot more comments from the President about the Native communities and the policies that affect our citizens. But I think the State of the Nation addressed by the President was directed more to Congress. I think his priorities was looking further and was more broad in the context of the nation as a whole, and not necessarily focused on Native America. A month or so ago, there were tribal leaders at the Tribal Nations Summit that was held here in Washington, D.C. in December. 12 tribal leaders were able to sit down and meet with the President one-on-one on one afternoon. And many of those tribal leaders, in fact, all of the tribal leaders that were there, I happened to be honored to be part of that. We did direct questions to the President, and we asked him for specific areas of support. And obviously, the time was limited. We do expect in the future, we ask for additional meetings with the President, not just a one-time meeting once a year, but these meetings with the cabinet secretaries. Those are the people who really affect the Indian programs and the services that are provided to Native Americans. But we ask for that, and we ask for support. We ask for meetings with the Office of Management and Budget and other high-level agencies. That's where really we need to be concentrated. So you would love to hear the President address and talk about Native Americans, but it's up to tribal leaders to continue to ask for access to the White House and access to him. I have to say, President Obama he made some commitments to Indian country during his campaign when he was running for president. He's kept his word. He has placed people in strategic, important positions within his administration, and they're doing a tremendous job. But it's limited. Again, access is limited, and we need to expand that. We need broader support. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing,
Sure.
President? Because in the President's message, a lot of it he talked about was, of course, was trying to address the economic security of this country, but about program flexibility. If you heard President Keel's speech today, we're asking for the same thing that the President was speaking about in his address 2 days ago. And we actually have developed a report at NCAI that we've shared with the White House. We've had meetings with the White House to talk about some of those areas, those specific areas of program flexibility. So we're hoping that we will be part of his part of the work that they're doing within the administration, targeting those areas where without a lot of new money, but with a little bit more government flexibility, our programs will be more efficient.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Dennis Zotai, National Museum of the American Indian. Also in yesterday's release of the census figures, a very high percentage of American Indians are under the age of 24. What would be your suggestions to all of Indian country on how we can mobilize the Indian vote for the age brackets between 18 and 24?
Well, I'm going to ask Jackie to talk about the native vote, get out the native vote, because we do have a concentrated effort to get out the native vote this coming year. It is important that we mobilize our young people, not just the first-time voters, but that's an important segment, but all of our native citizens in all of our communities to get out, get registered, and vote. When we look at how many were not even registered 4 years ago to the presidential election, almost 1 million people were not registered to vote. That's a significant piece of leverage to use in these native elections. So it's important that we not only talk about getting out the native vote, but we concentrate our efforts in how to do that. And I know Jackie's worked extremely hard, and her staff, and our partner, our sister agencies and partners in Indian country have worked hard to do that. So I'm going to ask her to address what we're doing specifically particularly these large Indian population areas.
Great. We have a plan. Go to nativevote.org, and you'll see our plan. We have a campaign for the year, not just targeting our tribal leaders. We've asked every tribe to have a Native Vote coordinator. We have monthly trainings and teleconferences for those coordinators, whether it be for the tribe, the state, the region, the organizations. We met with all the nonprofits, Native nonprofits, on Monday and talked to them about what they can do and what they can't do regarding supporting our Native Vote efforts. We met with the regional tribal associations last Friday and talked to them about what we can do as far as trainings in their communities. We've partnered with Rock the Vote and other areas to build within their civic curriculum. We will have a Native curriculum that will supplement theirs for schools with high populations of Native students. And we have a whole Native youth vote campaign that's going on in addition just to the regular. NativeVote.org, you'll learn about it. Thanks.
I want to add one area, and that is I wanted to thank the members of Congress that have come here today. I want to thank Congressman Cole for his remarks, Senator Akaka, Senator Barrasso. I know that their time is critical, but when we talk about people who support Indian issues, who are supportive, not just because they're required to, not just because they have constituents within their legislative districts, but because they understand what it really means. That's what we need in Indian country. We need the Native vote to get out and talk to those candidates, find out who and what they are, where they come from. Do they support our programs? And if they do, let's support them. Let's help them. That's what we need to do in a Native vote. But it's more than just talking about it. We need to organize and mobilize them. Thank you. I got busy there. We had another question there.
I'm going to take a question from one of the reporters online. This is from Mark Truhant from Truhant Reports. Question for President Keel. Can this bipartisan coup be used to treat tribes as a 51st state, especially for Medicaid and other entitlement programs?
I think he's referring to maybe this bipartisan cooperation.
Yep.
That would be great. I would love to see that. I think that Indian country would love to see this entitlement as a 51st state. There's been a lot of talk about that in the past, and we talk about, particularly at the Centers for, CMS. I know that they've talked about some of these regulations and how we can expand those, and I know that Dr. Rubidoux is here. She's leading some efforts in the Indian Health Service at HHS to get Indian people and Indian programs involved in how we can expand the services to all Native Americans. So, and I want to thank her for that support and that help. That's a great topic for us to discuss. It's something we need to continue on. Thank you for that question. I know I didn't answer it, but I thank you for the question.
It's a tough question. Yes.
Mary Jane Oatman with the National Education Association's Office of Minority Community Outreach. I want to commend NCAI for bridging the digital divide and bringing this forum into Indian country and specifically into the classrooms that are educating our children. Are we going to have any kind of a pulse on how many of our Native youth across the country in our BIE and public schools had access and opportunity to participate? And as a follow-up, maybe a challenge for you to engage our Native youth through like a Twitter feed or Twitter hall or something, because I really want to know what our Native youth's feedback from this phenomenal event is.
Great, thank you. And yes, we did. We did extensive outreach, and I will tell you we have a tweet here from a youth who wants to know Barbie. Well, I think this is her name, Terminator Barbie. So maybe I shouldn't say that. But how do we connect to our youth to the leaders how do we connect our youth to the leaders who spoke during the National Congress of American Indians? And do we have a mentor program? And so I'll just go, yes. So yes, we do have a mentor program at NCAI. We have fellows and interns that come to NCAI. A good share of our staff are fellows and interns. and we also have a youth commission. We have a number of youth partners that we worked on. We collaborate together with, including NIHB, NIEA, and we've developed a youth agenda. So we have a youth webpage on our website. We can connect to youth in many ways, and we'll continue to connect with youth. And we have a great agenda for this year. We've already developed it. One last question here. So can I have a question from the audience here? Yes.
Hi, Jim Myers, The Tulsa World. You speak of the bipartisan approach that's taken sometimes in Congress on different pieces of legislation, but that doesn't always translate into success. Can you identify 2 pieces of legislation that you believe must be passed by the upcoming session of Congress before it can be viewed as a success by the Indian country?
I think the most pressing need that we have is the Carcieri fix. The legislation, that's been the priority for Indian country for the past several years, and it has been, it almost was passed last year. We almost got there. It ran into a hold, I believe, but that is the number one priority. The other would be, as we mentioned earlier, the Violence Against our Women Act reauthorization and the Save Native Women Acts. All of those have bipartisan support. But number one would be the Carcieri fix. We absolutely need that fixed today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I apologize, we ran out of time for questions, but everyone who sent us an electronic question online, we will be answering those questions to you. If you have other questions, we'd be glad to answer them. You can get a hold of our press office or go to ncai.org, and those questions will be forwarded on to us. I want to thank you for listening and being part of our annual State of the Indian Nations address. And on behalf of the National Congress of American Indians, I'd like to thank C-SPAN, Native Voice One, and the tribal public and radio stations across the nation, and all the online viewers at ncai.org for realizing the importance of and covering this event today. Thank you. Ganesh Chish.